Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Event Insights. I'm Chrissy with Safe Events Global, and joining me today I have Simeon Radev. Simeon has a large festival background and has more recently started his own events consultancy company, Sodyn. And today he's going to be talking to us about social safety and social awareness at events. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat while he's talking, and maybe we'll get to them at the very end. We're not going to stop it during. And yeah, in the meantime, Simone, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Chrissy. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot to Safe Events for approving my request to be here. I've been following Safe Events for quite some time now, and it's pretty interesting how you've grown and the things you do. So I'm really grateful to be part of this. So thanks for that. Now for today, we will be talking about social safety, what that is, how it's implemented at events, what challenges organizers face in implementing this, and also a bit about the operational part of it. So how it is actually run, and and the teams that we deploy in order to implement this social safety. Now, let me just share my screen. All right. So first, a short introduction. Who am I? I'm a young Bulgarian. I'm based in Sofia, Bulgaria. I studied event management. I began my studies in 2017 at Breda University. And since then, I've lived in the Netherlands and worked there for the past 7 years, but now I moved back to Bulgaria. For those 7 years, I discovered my passion for crowd safety, and I started working in events as a volunteer back in 2017, and slowly I grew within the industry, and pretty much I've only worked in events since then. Back in Sofia, I just started an event consultancy. It's called Sodyn, and I'm focusing mostly on entrance operations, crowd safety, and social safety. About social safety, I've been working on and developing social safety teams and operations since 2022. So technically, I'm not really an expert on this topic, but during this presentation, I'll just share my experience with this, how it has developed, and my viewpoint and my advice on why this is important and how it can be implemented at events. Also, I've completed 2 professional certificates with Safe Events. Most recently, the NIBOSH International General Certificate, which has been pretty interesting course to be on, and was quite insightful, and I learned a lot. And I also did a professional diploma in crowd safety, again with Safe Events, back in maybe 2021, maybe 2022. I don't remember anymore. So that's me. What we'll be talking about today is what I briefly mentioned. We're going to talk about what social safety is, how we implement it, how we run a social safety team, what challenges there are there. And I've prepared a few tips and tricks for organizers, and a bit of the vision for the future. Now, let us consider an event as a city, as a living city. So just like any city, events require infrastructure, they require some kind of governance, they require also social systems in order to function, to develop and grow. And if you don't have any of these, then it but it may not work as it should. So here I would like to draw a parallel to what is a very interesting model that's called the donut economy model that was developed by Kate Rayward in 2012. And it goes on to explain a sustainable societal model of living, the donut or the dough being the ring, and inside we have the safe and just space for humanity. However, to build on this, you need a solid social foundation, which is the inner circle. This is where food, energy, water, and health, basic necessities, basic human needs are embedded. But we also have everything else that's needed for society to grow and thrive, such as housing, peace and justice, income and work, networks, social equity, and gender equality. On the other side of the ring, we have the ecological ceiling, as it's called, and this has to do with everything that's related to nature. So air pollution, fresh water, climate change, and all of this. And what the model explains is that the ideal situation for any society, city, or in our case, an event, is to live inside the dough. So that means that for events, in order to achieve this, we need to invest in the social foundation. So not just the infrastructure part, which is and amenities like energy, water, food, which are given at events, especially festivals. But we also need to think about the social aspects as well, such as social equity and peace and justice and all of the other things. And it's interesting because you can just apply this model to an event and then look at it from that perspective in order to have a sustainable event, both socially and environmentally. So for the social foundation, obviously these things are crucial, but also diversity, inclusion, and equality play a very important role. And the thing is, events are places where people go to express themselves, to experience something new, where they escape from the real world. And this is where boundaries are being torn between gender, between cultures, between anything. So it's a place where everyone can and tries to be themselves. And exactly because of this reason, this is usually a very fragile environment which needs care. And this is where social safety really comes into place. Sorry, just a second. So what is social safety? According to the Dutch Ministry of Education, Culture and Science, it's about improving social behavior. So a place which is considered socially safe is an environment where people treat each other with respect, and measures are taken against antisocial and transgressive behavior. And examples of that are bullying, aggression, discrimination, racism, and sexual harassment. So these are all things that social safety is focusing on, and you will see in a bit how that translates into the operational side of it at events. Another thing that I would like to mention is the topic of substance use. Now, substance use is a lot of times the reason for antisocial behavior, and this antisocial behavior is fueled by alcohol or drugs, and sometimes by a mixture of both. So this is a very important aspect when we talk about social safety, because when we have an event, if we want it to be socially safe, we need to have some social boundaries which are usually crossed, which are easily crossed if there's substance use involved. So that means that it plays a profound role in social safety at events. And also, it seems to be prevalent from our experience. It looks like I'll show some information in a bit, but it is prevalent at events because people tend to drink a lot or use drugs. And this can lead to incidents on an individual, but also on a social level. Now, this here is data on 232 collected reports that we have collected throughout, I think, 5 or 6 big festivals. We have a reporting system that is logging these incidents. And this is the output of these reports. So from what we see here is that substance use is responsible for around 70% of the cases that we encounter. So this means that it's really a thing that event organizers should be focusing on. And obviously drugs is a taboo, and obviously it's illegal. However, a lot of visitors at events do still use drugs. And I know it's quite hard to recognize this as a brand in order to create some preventive systems or measures. However, this is a very important thing that needs to be considered when it comes to social safety. And then the rest of the information, the rest of the data shows us that we have lower amount of cases when it comes to unwanted physical contact, aggression. We've logged also people passing out, intense physical contact, which are all intense incidents that people had to deal with. And we also have life-threatening situations and bordering an invasion of personal space, which are usually lower as in recorded data, but that's also because of their nature. It's really hard to catch someone in the act of doing something like this. So it's hard to report, and it's hard to prevent it. So how do we implement social safety at events? The first thing, which usually can serve as a bedrock for social safety, is a document that's called the Code of Conduct. Now here I've given an example of what a Code of Conduct looks like, and it goes on to explain what the event organizer stands against, and its goal to actually foster a safe environment. So here, for example, we have a paragraph. We have a collective responsibility. So if you observe or experience violations of this code of conduct, if you feel unsafe or notice that someone else is being harassed, please check in with each other and know that our staff security, first aid, and our social safety team is always here for you. So this might be familiar to some of you, and you might be drawing parallels to a health and safety policy, which also in organizations serve as a bedrock for building a safety culture. Now, the differences in between those two, however, is that one focuses on behavior and ethics, and the other one focuses on physical health and risk. One covers conduct and ethics, and it's usually optional, and the other one covers safety procedures, hazards, and incidents, and it's often legally required by law. Why I'm drawing a parallel with this is that one is not a substitute for the other, and also, just like with a health and safety policy, only by having a code of conduct doesn't make your event or environment safe. It's only a document. It's like a statement of intent. This is what we plan to do, but just by having this, it doesn't mean that you actually do anything. And it's not like a checkbox. Hey, we have a code of conduct. That's it. We're good. However, it can serve as a bedrock for building a socially safe environment. And here I would like to open a bracket. In this space, we never say a safe space, because one can never guarantee to anyone a fully safe space. So that's why we call it a safer space, because all the efforts go into improving the safety of the given environment. So having a code of conduct and a health and safety policy can be very useful in starting the implementation of a social safety system. Another example, another way of implementing social safety is by online and offline campaigns. Your online team can produce visuals like these that explain what the organization stands for, and explain to your visitors what's allowed, what's not allowed, and what to do if something happens. So it's about informing them before the event, and then at the event we have what we call an offline campaign. In this case, it's a banner, but it could be a poster that's hanged in toilets or anywhere else, that's explaining again what the social safety policy of the event is, how to get in contact if something happens, and just your general statement that you're doing something about this. Another way to look at social safety is accessibility, which at some events, if not at a lot of events, is neglected. But this is a very big part of what a socially safe space should be. It should be accessible to all kinds of people, because this is also part of your diversity and inclusion that a lot of events strive to achieve. However, the accessibility part is often neglected, especially at greenfield sites with hilly environment, where it's very difficult to create structures like this. However, if you want to work on social safety at your events, this is a very important topic to consider. Another very important thing is a medium for contact. And what I mean by this is that if you're having any systems implemented at your event that work towards increasing safety of your visitors, you need your audience to be able to get in contact with you if something happens. So one way to do this is to have an info point. It could be just a regular info point at your event, but it could also be a hub, and I'll explain that in a bit. A phone number. The events that we work with have a dedicated phone number that is being shared on these code of conducts, on these online and offline campaigns, where people can call or text if they feel distressed or if they have witnessed anything. Another thing is just a regular email. Some organizations have a specific report at the organization's name email that is dedicated for that, because a lot of times people will be hesitant to send an incident that they've experienced to the info email, where it might just be lost forever between all the other inquiries. So having a dedicated email really helps. An online form. relatively simple, but it is nice to have. However, an online form means that you need to do this probably after the event, when it's being sent out in a thank you email or whatever, which means that your organization is not actively responsive on site should something happen. And that's also the case with email, of course, unless it's constantly monitored. Team on the ground. I'll talk about this in a bit, because this is where the gist of social safety implementation really is. And this is an example of how a hub on site could look like. It needs to be welcoming. You don't want a dark tent or a corner where people wouldn't even go there if they were feeling okay, let alone if something has happened. So having a central spot like this really helps. And here on this picture, actually, we've put out a table with sunscreen. People love sunscreen when there's sun, so they come to the hub and they constantly engage with the people who are there. So it's a really fun and cheap trick to start engaging with your visitors, to talk about what this is, how it functions, and why is it important. So we are coming to how to run a social safety team. So a social safety team is consisted of a few people based on the size of the event. Usually it's consisted out of a coordinator that's in touch with the organization and has a direct line with them. And then we have a few people who are being coordinated in teams of 2, and we have someone at the hub if there is a hub. Now, we have people in teams of 2, and that's important because when dealing with incidents, if the team needs to intervene somewhere, it's really useful to have a second person who can help out, either de-escalate the situation or assist in calling for support, or just to deal together with a certain issue. The direct contact we have with the organization should be someone with authority, because a social safety team, although being trained on how to react to certain incidents, we don't usually have full authority when it comes to kicking people out, for example, or banning people from certain sites and so on. So we really need someone from the organization who can work with us and have that type of authority to intervene when it comes to dealing with more complicated incidents, such as kicking someone out for inappropriate behavior, for example, or someone who has experienced something extremely heavy emotionally, or someone has used too much drugs, for example. So we do need the organization support in dealing with some more complicated situations. The first thing that needs to happen for a social safety team is the training. People need to get trained, and the teams I've worked with, I am not an expert on this topic. So it's very important that you, as an organizer, if you want to implement a social safety team, that onboard a local expert that understands the issues related to social safety, but also the legal implications and the local laws, how they function and how they can be enforced when it comes to this. This is very important because if you have someone who's external, who's not even in the country, advising you on social safety, it's quite difficult because you can enforce certain things through the law, and also culturally it may differ what's accepted and what's not accepted. So we would usually onboard a local expert in this. That's sole focus is education and training on this topic, and we would train people in this, how to recognize certain situations, how to deal with them, how to respond to them, and how to report them and follow up. We do invest a lot in briefing and disseminating information before the event on the key details of the event. So here's a snippet of an introduction to a briefing for awareness teams. Here we say it is worth noting that the awareness crew or social safety team or guardian angels, wherever you like to call them, it's all of these have the same purpose. It's worth noting that this is not security nor first aid and will not act as one. So we're not, the awareness team is not trained security and is not trained first aider necessarily. And they're not there to do this. However, they do serve a role to fill the gap between security, first aid, and the visitors. Because when it comes to social safety, for example, sexual harassment, a lot of incidents go unnoticed or unreported because people don't have that medium for sharing that information. And apart from that, people wouldn't go to security to say, for example, that they have been sexually harassed, because a lot of them think that they might not be taken seriously or they might not respond the way they should. And same with first aid, people wouldn't, they would most likely hide that they have used drugs because they might fear that they will be kicked out or even prosecuted by police. So what the social safety team does in a situation like this is very crucial because it provides that middle layer of safety, of sharing, where people can actually go and approach these people with exactly these concerns. And that's the role of the social safety team, to respond to these kind of concerns and to build trust with the audience. We do brief the awareness teams that they should engage and dance with the audience in order to build trust, because a lot of times when they see crew or a badge or a radio station, people immediately think, oh, this is someone from the organization. It's hard to engage with these people, and if I have something of concern, it's hard to say that to them. So it's really important that the awareness team builds trust with the audience, dances even with them, talks to them, and this is also where the profile of the social team comes into place. Obviously, people who are very introvert or very scary looking and intimidating are not a great fit, and you should be looking for something in between, for people who are confident, who are not afraid to speak up, but are also empathetic and know how to listen. And another very important thing is that the team is an extension of your organization. So there are extra set of eyes on the ground that can look for all kinds of irregularities, whether it's productional or social or crowd or anything. So when it comes to dealing with incidents, this is a very useful model that we use. It's called the 5Ds, and it stands for distract, delegate, document, delay, and direct. This applies to situations who are potentially dangerous. Consider a situation where you see a couple. For example, one of the people is cornered, and you see from their body language that they're not feeling comfortable, and on the other side, the other person is being quite intimidating. So in that situation, for example, an awareness team needs to evaluate what is happening. So what they could do is they could try to distract, so use one of these days by trying to interact with them. And this is where it's really useful that there are people, that it's a team of two, because one can focus on the victim in that sense and the other on the perpetrator, if that's the case. And they could try to split them up or investigate the situation together. Direct approach, for example, is something we don't usually advise on doing unless very necessary, and that's to go on and tell someone, hey, stop doing this. But this is in other cases where it's a bit more apparent what is happening. For example, someone is being sexually harassed or groped, or personal space is being invaded, and so on. We have document as well. It's quite useful. However, it really differs on where you're based in terms of laws about GDPR and so on. Because in some countries you can easily use this. You can easily take out your phone and film inappropriate behavior, which can be later used in court, for example. And there are other countries where this will do you no good. It's just not relevant in court, regardless of what you have filmed. Although still it can inform your decision making, whether that person needs to be kicked out, for example, or who was right or who was wrong if you're settling an argument, for example. So this is a very good framework to work with, and these are mostly the tools that we use to interfere when there's a given situation on site. Communication is a very, very important part of running a social safety team, obviously, because the social safety team needs to be linked to security and first aid whenever they have the need for that. Since they're patrolling the terrain, they're going everywhere or in their designated area, and they might encounter people who are passed out. They might encounter fights and all kinds of other situations, so which might be out of their reach. So for this, we developed certain protocols for communication. As you can see, it's with radio stations. And we have a dedicated channel for the awareness, where the team internally communicates. And we have certain protocols to report the different levels of incidents, the way we've split them. So we usually split them in 3 levels: severe impact, moderate impact, and low impact. And this usually corresponds to security threat levels, at least in the Netherlands. So in level 1 incidents, and examples of that are aggression or sexual assault, losing consciousness, fights, and life-threatening situations. The team is instructed to immediately contact the control room or the control post, command post, CP, whatever, and notify them using a strict language protocol, who they are, where they are, and what they need. And with this, we try to create a very efficient or as efficient as possible system of reporting. Now, with big events, communicating where you are and where you need assistance can be quite tricky, because especially at greenfield events, it's complicated because there are no landmarks apart from the stages that the temporary structures that can guide you. However, at big events, it's quite complicated to say, for example, I'm at the main stage in the middle, or that main stage could be with 10,000 people capacity, and it can be quite hard to actually see where you are. So for that, we use coordinates, and sometimes we use security positions, depending on what the organization prefers. Security positions are quite useful because they're usually static, and also security knows exactly, if you say I'm at security post 4, they immediately know where to go. So there are different ways of coordinating that. Then we have the reporting part. So once someone has dealt with a certain situation, we ask them to report that as soon as possible. Obviously, the situation is a priority, but as soon as the situation has been taken care of, whatever that might mean, it needs to be reported. And here I've given a few examples of reports that we have taken, and these are also the ones that have been analyzed in one of the previous graphics. So here, for example, we have a level 2 moderate impact, too drunk or too high. I found a guy asleep at the hub, brought in by someone from us. I tried keeping him awake, but he was rolling his eyes back every 3 seconds, and every time he opened his eyes, he was very confused where he was. First aid already checked, but they thought it was all okay, so we made him stay awake until he was good again and found his friends. So this is a situation that we've encountered and we've reported. And with social safety teams, it's very important that you have a good working relationship with first aid. Since the social awareness team wouldn't be necessarily first aid trained or medically trained, it's also not there for that. It's very important that, especially with intoxication cases, that you always check with first aid. Then once they've checked, then you can continue taking care of the people, but this is very important. Otherwise, you might be liable for not having done something on time when you should have. So we come to the challenges that organizers face. This is a very big part, and we always encounter one of these things when we try to talk to an organization about implementing a social safety team, or if they want to implement one. The first one is a lack of understanding. What I mean by this is it could be a lot of things, actually. Lack of understanding the issue of social safety, so why that's important, why we need to focus on it, why we need to invest resources in this. And we also have a lack of understanding in terms of the issues at their events. Because no one really reports, because there are no mediums for reporting, event organizers might think, oh yeah, but this actually never happens at our events because we've never heard of it. And one can argue, well, you cannot hear something if someone doesn't tell it to you, or if they don't have a way of telling it. There was an example of that with a big festival in one of the Nordic countries. where they said, oh yeah, but there's nothing really happening at our events, until they did a research within their audience and found out that I don't remember the exact numbers, but there were quite a concerning percentage of visitors that had experienced some kind of sexual harassment, and this really triggered them into switching their focus on this. So this is a very big thing. If you don't check, there's no way you would know. The other thing, obviously, and that's a very big one, are budgets. Sometimes organizers really want to implement something like this because it sounds good. It sounds the way it should. It fits with their idea. However, you have costs of the of personnel. You have costs of implementation. So it really is an investment. And in that case, it's just like safety. I mean, a lot of organizers really want their event to be safe, but what do they do? Do they invest in this? Sometimes yes, sometimes not. So budgets are really a big problem when it comes to implementing this. And another thing is that because it's an emerging topic, a lot of the budgets for events have already been made, for example, the previous year, and suddenly they see that they have an unexpected cost that they need to implement this year, and it cannot really work out. So it needs to be done maybe the year after that, where budgets can be planned for, and this can be reviewed again. Another thing is that they don't know where to start. So again, it sounds very tempting. It sounds interesting. It sounds good. It should be done. However, they do not know where to start and how to implement something like this. As I mentioned before, some might think, oh yeah, we have a code of conduct, then we should be good. But this is also where the lack of understanding comes into play. And another thing that we've seen is that people think that this is a woke issue, and wouldn't really do anything about it because they don't feel like this is something important. They neglect it because they view it in this way. But it actually comes down to the safety of your visitors, and this should be paramount in any event and organization. So viewing it as such an issue is not the right way to do this. And on top of that, I believe, just like with sustainability, social safety will become increasingly important, and events who invest in that would have an edge against their competitors. And the last thing is that the new generation would start finding this more and more important, and would start looking for events that actually invest and focus on these kind of topics. We're coming to the tips and tricks. So these issues that we've just discussed, event organizers can navigate with a few different things. The first one being, what I already mentioned, is to onboard an external local expert. Expert, I mean someone who focuses on social safety, who focuses on social issues, and you can onboard them within your organization or as an external person or advisor on how to start working on such a system. This is very important because in order to save costs, events might think, oh yeah, we can just do it ourselves, just like with crowd safety or with sustainability. But just because you think it's easy doesn't mean it will work out. And also no one really expects you to be an expert on any of this. So it is better to onboard someone who actually knows what this is. They wouldn't necessarily know how to implement this at events. But this is where you as an organizer, knowing your organization and the way your system functions, can figure out a way how to create a system that implements both of these things. A working operational system that takes on social safety topics as part of their DNA, so to say. Another thing is to start with a lean implementation. Budgets are obviously a real thing, and constraints are even more real. So you can start with something small. It doesn't need to be. You don't have to invest 10,000 pounds, dollars, or whatever immediately into something like this. But you can start with talking to your audience, talking to your team, finding out what is happening in the space, and so on, and try to be creative in how you could implement something like this. And the first thing that I would do as an organizer would be to talk and involve your team. What we've seen with organizations that really want to implement something like this is that it needs to start from the top. So you cannot have your team that's not on board. So say you're an operations manager, and you want to implement something like this, but your marketing, your CEO, your director, or whatever, they don't agree with this. It's going to be quite hard to actually translate this to your audience. So it really needs to start with the organization and with your team. So involving your team can be just a simple discussion. Hey, let's talk about this. Let's think of ways on how to do something like this. And it can also be even training with that local expert of yours that can bring these issues to the surface and actually have a constructive discussion on it. And here comes the training part again. It is very important before implementing a social safety team. I would advise get trained within your team first, because if you have your team on board, then you can do much more than just trying to implement something that is not really embedded at all in your organization. Collect data. Just like with the reports, find ways to collect information about these things, whether it's incidents, whether it's insights from visitors, whether it's feedback, or even having someone on the ground to talk to people. Find a way to start collecting information to see what's the state of your event. Because based on this, you can start actually doing some constructive things and not just, oh yeah, nothing happens at our event, we don't have to do this, or just because you thought this is cool, let's invest 10,000 pounds into it without any data that you can really back up this with. Involve your audience. So the more people you involve, the more you can actually increase the safety of your environment. Because by just having your team or a social safety team on the ground, say that you're in total 30 people for 20,000 people event, it's almost nothing. So the more people you have that are on board with this, the better it will reflect, the better the efforts of this system will be reflected on the event and on the audience. So invite a bunch of people from your audience to your office, have a constructive talk about this. Try to communicate with them as much as possible what you're trying to do, and even ask help from them. And this is relevant not just for social safety, but for any aspect of the event, actually, because what we see is that a lot of events don't actually talk to their visitors, and they just do things because they feel like this is the right thing to do. But you can get a lot of valuable information from your audience because they're the ones who support you and they're the ones that you do this for. Look at the bigger picture. This investment now is not just for this event this year. If you start working on this, try to look a few years ahead and try to build a strategy out of it, instead of just doing this because of peer pressure of other events that now do it, or because you think it's nice and you need to have it. But try to think a bit about the bigger picture. How would this reflect us in 5 years? How can we build this within a couple of years? How can this be embedded in our strategy? And as I mentioned, if this is really built in your DNA as an event, you can have an edge over your competitors. And you need to give it time to develop. You cannot just drop $10,000 or pounds on a social safety system with a team, with everything, with communication, and think it's like flipping a switch. This will not work like this. So it needs to start slowly but surely, and you need to have this cycle of feedback and letting it grow. So experiment, test stuff, and try to get feedback from audience, from your team, from the whole process, and see what works and what doesn't. But the more you do it, the easier it will get to implement, and the better it will reflect your company as well. So where do we go from here when it comes to social safety? The first thing is, I would say we need to start including this in risk assessments. A lot of the things such as alcohol and drugs are already there, but maybe we need to start considering the psychological and the social impacts at the event of these things, and what can be done to first to prevent them, and as they're happening to manage them and decrease them, and eventually potentially eliminate them, but that probably won't be the case. The next thing would be safer space policies. Safer, not safe, because we can never promise a fully safe space, just like how we cannot eliminate fully risk. So as an event, you can look into developing these policies, and what that would mean for you, for your event, for your visitors, and so on. And it can be even with other events in the industry who have the same vision to develop something like this together. Education and training, of course. We need to get educated on these things, and we need to get trained on how to deal with certain issues when it comes to social safety. Again, a lot of people think this is a woke issue and will neglect it, but this is a very real thing, and it's influencing the events and the society that it reflects in multiple ways. So it's important that we start educating ourselves and invest in training when it comes to this. Again, data collection. Without information, there's not much you can do that would actually work, because you need to base your decisions on some facts. And your event is full of data. Just start looking at it and see what you can get out of there. And if not, then maybe you need to start collecting information. And lastly, government support. I know this may be painful for someone, because not a lot of times government work with us. However, there are probably a lot of initiatives and programs that are already running, especially in the European Union, that might be able to help you either raise capital for this or assist you with developing your network when it comes to this. So this is also somewhere where you can look at to get support. And moreover, there are already a lot of laws and policies that focus on these things, but we just need to look at them, restructure them for our events, and see what we could use and implement there. And with this, I would like to thank everyone who was here. I hope you learned a thing or two, or at least it was informative. And yeah, I would like to open the floor for questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simeon. That was really, really interesting. Everyone, yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat on the right here. I know I had a couple of people message privately to say that they had to run off, but they had found it really interesting. While the last few people are thinking here, I was just thinking, when you were going through your tips and tricks, Simeon, and you were talking about gathering data, having done that before, have you found that there are certain events, like certain types of events, or even certain types of festivals that need to invest more in a social safety team, or like need to think about it more compared to other events?
Yeah, definitely. I think the bigger an event is, the more we need to pay attention to this, because you have a bigger chance of having different cultures there, and also events which are very culturally diverse, because the more diversity you have, I mean, that's great, of course, but it might be also a precursor for how would you call it, for any issues that might arise within cultures that clash. So it depends really on the profile of the crowd, of course. So this is also something that touches upon crowd safety. It needs to be based on that.
Yeah, fair. That makes sense. I don't see any questions coming in here now, and I know people are probably rushing off to get to their next meetings. So thank you so much, Simeon. That was really, really interesting. And thank you everyone for joining us here today. If something does crop up and you think of another question, you can fire it on to me, and I'll send it on to yourself, Simeon. But in the meantime, thank you so much again.
Thanks.
Everyone, enjoy your day, and I'm sure we'll all chat soon.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye everyone.